Welcome to Rising Leaders of New York with your host, David Zwerin of Hill and Moin, LLP. They present to you conversations with today's and future leaders of New York City discussing the challenges and issues relevant to New Yorkers. You can find this show at www.hillmoin.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Now here are the hosts of Rising Leaders of New York.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rising Leaders of New York. My name is David Zwerin. I am the senior trial attorney at Hill and Moin, LLP. We are a plaintiff's personal injury law firm focusing on serious construction accidents and premises liability matters. But I also get the opportunity to host these podcasts and speak to a lot of wonderful, interesting guests who are on the cutting edge of issues you as New Yorkers need to know about in New York. And today I am joined by a fabulous and very exciting guest, Rabbi Laurie Gold, a one-time defense attorney in the state of New York, and now a licensed rabbi available for events and based out of Queens, is here to join me. We're going to have a very interesting discussion today about the law and religion and community and I imagine a whole bunch of other topics. Rabbi Laurie Gold, thank you so much for joining us here on Rising Leaders of New York.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first podcast. So in the Jewish religion, we say a Shehecheyanu prayer. We say, God, thank you for creating us, sustaining us, and bringing us to this very special time. We say that when there's a first time we're doing something nice. So I'm very grateful to be here.
Well, I'm glad you were able to say the prayer over this occasion, that it merited that. So we'll talk a little bit about your path to becoming a rabbi, but before we get into that, tell us a little about yourself in general and what led you to first going to law school and becoming a lawyer.
Well, I grew up with many lawyers around in the family. My father was a lawyer. He was a criminal defense attorney, and a lot of my parents' friends were rabbi. I sometimes mix up rabbis and lawyers. A lot of my friends' parents were lawyers. I grew up with a lot of them, and I learned to, as they say, think like a lawyer. My mother got into Columbia Law School in the 1940s, but she decided not to go. But I think I grew up with parents questioning me a lot and talking about issues around the kitchen table. So I decided to go to law school. I actually found out recently that I always wanted to be a rabbi, but when I graduated college, you couldn't be out of the closet and be a rabbi. And I've known I'm gay since I'm 16. So I had to sadly put that aside, being a rabbi, and I went to law school. But I actually had a very nice career as a lawyer. I practiced in negligence defense for about 20 years, and I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed the trial work. I enjoyed meeting people like Hill and Moin and their attorneys who were my adversaries, and it was a nice run being a lawyer.
And how did you end up getting into the defense side of litigation? What did you think of the
it was my first job. My first job out of law school. I kind of fell into it. And I liked it. On TV, you see the ads for people who are plaintiffs' attorneys. But, as they say, the insurance companies have people working on their side. So I was one of those people. I had one case with, I've had cases all over the 5 boroughs and Long Island, too, sometimes in Westchester. I had one case with your firm, and I ended up paying way too much money for the case. It was more than the case was worth, but you were defending your representing your clients vociferously as you always do. And years later, my poor mother, who was in her 80s at the time, broke her arm in a trip and fall. And even though it wasn't as big as most of your cases, your firm graciously took on the case for a fellow, for the mother of a lawyer. And my mother was I love my mother to death. Sadly, she died a year and a half ago, but she talked too much. And even though she was prepared to not say a lot during a deposition, she talked too much. I thought that she wouldn't get any money for the case, but your firm still gave her got her a lot of money. So I was very grateful. So ever since then, I've referred cases to your firm because you work really, really hard and can get money for clients even when they talk too much, like my mother, God rest her soul.
Well, thank you so much for all the compliments, and we're certainly always here for our clients and for the family. I'll say, personally, probably nothing makes us happier than hearing a defense counsel say they thought they overpaid on the case, but had to do it anyway.
I didn't tell my boss at the time, but now that I'm not working as a lawyer, I can freely say that. But yeah. I'll tell you, being a rabbi is sort of like the opposite of being a lawyer, at least the kind of law I practice, because as a lawyer, you have to argue a lot, especially if you're doing litigation. That's part of the game. And I argued all the time, and I'm not really someone who likes to argue. So as a rabbi, I don't have to argue, and I rarely argue, and it's so much better for my soul this way. I'm grateful I made the switch.
Well, the law is a very specific career, and it certainly requires a lot of passion, a lot of investment to it. It's certainly doing what I do is not something I would recommend to everybody. It's a grind, and it's adversarial. We have good relationships with our adversary. We respect them, and we try to peacefully move these cases along and agree on what I would call the nonsense. But then you got to fight like heck about the stuff that really matters for your client on an almost daily basis. And I imagine in your world, in religion, becoming a rabbi, it's very much not that at all.
Right.
There must be much more a sense of community in what you do.
Yeah, it's much more satisfying. I mean, it's very gratifying. I have the honor of helping people when they're suffering the most horrible circumstances, the loss of a loved one, when a relative is dying. I've sat with people and said prayers during hospice, times of hospice, and it's a very intense job, but it's very satisfying. And on the other hand, I could be with a family at a funeral, and a month later, that same family, I'm celebrating a wedding with them. I'm performing the wedding, of the grandchild of the person who died, or officiating a baby naming of someone, and I've done their grandfather's funeral a year and a half before. So it's very, very gratifying that way. And usually, people say to me, Laurie, isn't it sad doing funerals? It's usually not sad for me because I'm hearing about these wonderful, inspiring people. And everything they tell me about the person is just gives me a lot of hope and inspiration. So in that sense, even funerals is not a downer for me.
Yeah, funerals are certainly always a very, very tough day for the people that have lost someone. But I imagine as the rabbi, it's kind of an amazing thing hearing those stories and making those connections with people who maybe sometimes you meet for the first time. I don't know if you usually meet them for the first time, or if they're member of your congregants who you've gone on a journey and really seen what they've gone through for a long period of time.
Yeah, and many of the funerals that I do, most of them actually are people that I've never met before, because a few of the local funeral chapels call me on a regular basis. It's funny because they refer to me as the kind rabbi, and I'm like, well, aren't all rabbis kind? But that's what I'm known for, being the kind rabbi. So if family comes in and the funeral director thinks they should have a kind, I mean, everybody should have a kind rabbi, but that's kind of like what I'm known for. What I do is I speak to them for a long time, and in my eulogy, I basically repeat back to them everything that they say, but they're heard and they tell me, oh, I love your eulogy. It's basically everything that they've said to me, but I'll just frame it in such a way. But I think they like hearing what they've said, through my lips.
Interesting. And at what point did you leave the law to become a rabbi? And I guess what changed in your life that you felt it was time to pursue the career? It sounds like you kind of wanted to from the outset.
That's a really good question, Dave. Nobody's ever phrased it that way. And I've been asked this question, but nobody said what's changed. And what happened was that my father was very, very sick. And he was actually, he fell and he hurt himself in his own driveway, and he was in a coma.
So sorry.
And thank you. And it's probably not a coincidence. That's when I decided to take the step that was always in the back of my mind for a long time. I think I had some kind of spiritual awakening. He was only 71. These days it's young, and he died shortly after. But when he was in a coma, that's when I decided to go to rabbinical school. Times had changed. You could be out of the closet and become a rabbi. So I had that option, but it was really hard, David, because I didn't really know Hebrew very well. So I had to take a year of Hebrew, and I when I was admitted to the school, even then I had to have tutoring for my Hebrew, because most of the people that go to rabbinical school, they're fluent in Hebrew. I wasn't fluent in Hebrew, so I had to do a lot of catch up, which was very humbling. And I guess it's good for rabbis to be humble. It's not the worst thing for a rabbi to be humble, but it was a very humbling experience to have because I never had tutors in my life. I was always a really good student, so. It was good for me, I think.
And how long have you been a rabbi since?
I've been a rabbi for 12 years now.
And during that time, what are some of the things you've done? Have you had any interesting experiences? I don't know what congregations you've been affiliated with. What are some of the highlights you've had?
That's a good question. Well, I did serve I'm serving a congregation in Connecticut now, but my service there is going to end in the middle of July. But I've had wonderful experiences. One thing that was particularly meaningful to me was up in this Connecticut congregation, and a woman came to me and she said that her son was mentally challenged and never had a bar mitzvah ceremony. He was 38 years old. And she said, yeah, the other rabbi, he never got around to it. So I said, well, we're going to do it. We're going to do it in a month. So we did some preparation. He wasn't capable of reading from the Torah and doing a lot of other things that other people do for their bar mitzvah ceremony. But he was capable of saying a couple of prayers and standing up on the altar with us. And it was very, very schmaltzy. Almost everybody in the room was crying. His mother brought in relatives, and at 38, he had his bar mitzvah ceremony. And I was very happy that I could make that happen. And that was probably a highlight for me. And also, a lot of people in the congregation felt the same way. It was very beautiful seeing him have his bar mitzvah, at age 38. That was great. And then on the other end of it, I had the good fortune just a year ago to perform a wedding at Gracie Mansion with the mayor, and that was exciting. I had never been to Gracie Mansion before. I'd never met the mayor. He was very gracious. I did the Jewish prayers and some other things, and he gave a beautiful speech, and that was really fun and exciting for me to work with the mayor.
Oh, wonderful. And so, I guess what have you felt has been the biggest transition from the law to being a rabbi? And does it give you any perspective on the issues with the law, things you'd like to be changed, or just generally happy to have left it behind?
That's a perspective. Well, one thing that I realized is that people need. I realized this when I was a lawyer, because when I do what you do also. I used to go to depositions with people. I would prepare them for trial, and people are nervous. People are afraid, and people need a lot of hand holding. Sometimes literally, and that's something that certainly carried over to my being a rabbi. People need a lot of care. People are scared. They're scared of death. They're scared of war. They're afraid of what's going to happen, in the future because of climate change. And I think that that's something that I brought as a lawyer and as a rabbi, trying to comfort people at a hard time, especially during COVID. I mean, all of us who have lived through this know how psychologically damaging it's been to people. It still is, I think. I had lunch with someone the other day, one of my congregants, and she was telling me about her daughter who's anorexic. And I've heard a lot of stories of young girls and boys becoming anorexic because they feel like they don't have any control over their life. It's gotten worse because, since COVID came our way. That's basically, I think it's important for lawyers and for rabbis to hold people's hands and guide them through, tough times.
I really completely agree with that. Having never been a rabbi, I can only speak from my end, but I guess we both have that experience of what it's like when you're caught up in in the legal system. You were on the defense side, but very much on the plaintiff side. And I guess you had some experience when we represented your mother, and it's really a hard thing. People get very invested in this. They don't understand. They may have certain thoughts about an outcome, and it can be very traumatic. And usually people, and life doesn't stop when you're involved in a lawsuit, even if you're suffering from a lot of physical and emotional damage. Maybe divorce can happen, or business catastrophes can happen, and you get hit by a flood. Any number of things can go wrong. And very often people just need to know that whoever they've entrusted as their lawyer is going to fight like heck, and they can trust they're going to have their interests at heart. But when they come in, they'll speak to them frankly, and they'll look out for them like they're part of their family. I think having that kind of community of trust in the people you deal with in a business relationship, as well as the community you have in your religious aspect, whether you're religious or not so religious, but to have people you connect with spiritually in life, I think is an important thing that maybe we don't have as much since COVID.
I think you're right. I think a lot of people, including my mother, I think that COVID actually killed her, because she was just got so lonely and, sad, that Barbara Streisand song, "People who need people are the luckiest people in the world." But people who need people did not fare very well during COVID, especially if they were widowed or, otherwise single. And it was really hard. And I think, I know some people who are very happy to be isolated, but, they're misanthropic people, and they were very happy not to have an excuse to go outside. But I think for most of us, even people who aren't extroverted like I am, I think it was really hard. And people used to go to temple, used to go to church, or the people that did, not everybody used to, but I think people got out of the habit of that. And I think that's hurting. Temples are closing, churches are closing. I can't speak for mosques or Hindu temples or other religious institutions, but I know that people got out of the habit, and I think that they're hurting from that. I think that we all need a sense of community. I mean, humans are social animals, and I think we need each other and need to be with each other.
No, I think it's very true. In modern times, there probably wasn't ever a period like this, like maybe the great pandemic in the early 20th century, something like this happened. But basically, in all of our lifetimes, and maybe even our parents' lifetimes, there was no occurrence like this where people just broke that habit of going out into the world and going to jobs or going to their local church or synagogue or mosque and having that weekly community. And then the idea that you could turn that off and not have that in your life is kind of a new thing. And I'm optimistic people will start to return. I certainly see the streets of New York are more flooded with people, and hopefully that is extending out into the world. People need each other, and hopefully they're finding good people like you to give them that sense of community.
Oh, thank you. I went to the city Saturday. I saw Camelot in Lincoln Center, which I thought was great. It got some poor reviews, but I thought it was excellent. But I was so happy to walk up Broadway and see, hundreds and hundreds of people walking by smiling. It happened to be a nice sunny day. That was depressing. I remember during the height of COVID, beginning, you go through Times Square and there wouldn't be a person there. It was really like a ghost town. It was strange.
Yeah, I think it is more optimistic when you can go out and have a day like that and have an experience of just going to a show and having a packed house and even feeling that you're with people doing something normal like that. And people need those kind of experiences in life. So we'll end on a more optimistic note with that. And I know you have a very busy schedule up ahead, so I won't keep you too long. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast,
thank you, David.
Rabbi. If people want to get in touch with you for any special events in your life or whatever you might like to get in touch with them, how could they reach you?
You can reach me at lauriegold18@yahoo.com. That's, you can see how to spell Laurie, LAURIEGOLD 18@yahoo.com. But if you Google Rabbi Laurie Gold, you'll see my name mentioned, and I think you can also get me on Wedding Wire. But Rabbi Laurie Gold 18@yahoo.com. That'd be great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for your time.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so that brings to an end another episode of Rising Leaders New York. Again, my name is David Zwerin of the law firm of Hill and Moin. We're located at 2 Wall Street, Suite 301, New York, New York. You can reach us at 212-668-6000, or you could find our website, which is at Hill, HILLMOIN.com. Until next time, I'll see you when I'm joined by another rising leader of New York. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
You've been listening to Rising Leaders of New York, hosted by David Zwerin of Hill and Moin, LLP. You can catch prior episodes at www.hillmoin.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing this show with others.